Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started for today. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, MHTTC, welcome to today's webinar. We are not going to fail. A focus on team well-being is the name of today's presentation. We're really grateful so many of you could join us to learn more about this important topic. And we look forward to sharing information and tips and guidance and to having an exchange of information with all of you. My name is Maria Monroe DeVita, and I am one of the core faculty with the Northwest MHTTC. I am also an associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at University of Washington. First, let's just do a quick introduction to the MHTTC so you have a little more context about today's presentation. The MHTTC network is nationwide and supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, some of you know it as. Our purpose includes disseminating and implementing evidence-based practices in behavioral health. The goals of the network include supporting mental health related to evidence-based practices, heightening the awareness, knowledge, and the skills of the workforce, fostering regional and national alliances, and providing and connecting you to free training and technical assistance. Now a little bit about the Northwest MHTTC. The Northwest MHTTC is based at the University of Washington in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. We provide training and technical assistance in evidence-based practices to Region 10, which includes Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, although we do a number of other areas of work across the country as well, and supporting particularly around our areas of focus. Our area of focus in particular for this training today is on evidence-based practices for treating psychosis and other serious mental illnesses. And that includes Assertive Community Treatment, or ACT, which again aligns with our topic today. We also provide training on a variety of topics, including integrated care, suicide prevention, diversity and equity issues, school mental health, peer support, and trauma-informed approaches, as well as others. Our target workforce includes behavioral health and primary care providers, school and social service staff, and others whose work has the potential to improve behavioral health outcomes for individuals with or at risk of developing serious mental illnesses. How do we fulfill our mission? Well, through live events like this webinar that we will also record and post for future reference, virtual learning communities, free self-paced online, free online self-paced courses, newsletters, and our resource library on our website, and connection to other training centers and events. And you can see our website right here. Got a little ahead of myself there. And then I just really quickly want to say that our intention is always to be mindful of using language that promotes recovery and culturally appropriate terminology. We encourage all clinicians participating in our webinar today to use language that demonstrates respect for a person's dignity and worth. And this is consistent with recovery-oriented practices and promotes treatment environments that foster respect, human dignity, and hope. And with that, we want to next review the logistics regarding communication during today's session. So we've made every attempt to make today's presentation secure. If you need to end the presentation unexpectedly, we will follow up using your registration information. Due to the large audience, all attendees are muted and will not appear on video. The presentation is being recorded, so the recording and the slides will be made available on our website in a few weeks, which will be notified of by mail or by email. We ask you to be mindful to avoid disclosing identifying details about persons receiving services if you share a question or scenario. And then you will receive an email within 2 weeks of how to access a certificate of attendance if you desire that, but there are not formal CEUs available for today's webinar. Lastly, your feedback is crucial to our work, so we would appreciate your response to a very short survey that just takes a few minutes after the session. Our team will share the link in the chat box today, and we'll also send a reminder by email tomorrow. And when I say chat box, what I mean is actually the question and answer box. If you send anything through chat, that just comes to MHTTC staff. We're required by SAMHSA to conduct the survey, but we really appreciate your feedback about this session and to plan future sessions. And your participation helps to keep free training coming, so we really encourage you to fill out the evaluation after today. As I mentioned, we'll be monitoring the QA box to facilitate answering many questions during the presentation. And if you have any, please type them in there at any point throughout the presentation. Please avoid putting content questions in the chat, as I mentioned earlier. Our team will moderate and share questions with the presenter. We might provide a short written response during the webinar or field them live as time allows, but we'll do our best to get an answer to you depending on how many questions we get within the time we've got today. As I mentioned earlier, info in the chat will only be seen by our training team, but please don't hesitate to send us anything that you need help with or assistance, or you want to convey a message to us, and we will assist you live. We have a number of us ready to do that. SAMHSA sponsors this work, but it does not reflect any official position from SAMHSA on this content. And now the most important part is to tell you about our presenters today. I'm super thrilled to introduce them to you. I know both of them quite well. Lynette Studer is a clinical assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. She teaches MSW students in the mental health field unit, as well as classes on mental health policies and services and advanced practice skills in mental health. She is also a former ACT team leader and trains ACT teams and team leaders nationally. And while Lynette will be our primary presenter today, we did want to acknowledge her colleague and my colleague as well, Mimi Choi Brown. She's an assistant professor at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work, informed by over a decade of practice and leadership in community mental health services. Her research focuses on improving access to high quality mental health services for individuals who experience significant psychiatric disabilities and supervision focused strategies to improve the implementation of recovery oriented evidence-based practices in routine care. And Mimi will be helping all of us with the Q&A box behind the scenes for today. And I believe that is my last slide before I turn it over to you, Lynette. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Perfect.
And you should be able to share your screen.
Let me. Good. You see a full screen?
Yep.
Do you see notes?
No.
Oh, I feel already successful with this. So thank you so much, Maria. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here today. Especially, I want to thank everyone who's signed on, because I realize that 90 minutes on a Monday is really something to ask for team leads to have that amount of time on a Monday. So I really appreciate it. I hope that this is beneficial for you, and if anything, kind of rejuvenates your spirits to keep working with this. So thank you very much. As Maria said, this is the second of 4 webinars that we're focusing on the pivotal role of ACT team leaders in the implementation and sustaining of higher fidelity ACT practices. So, today we're going to focus on how you and others really focus in on being mindful of the team and the well-being of the team. So we're hoping that we can really engage in a dialogue with you around both past and current strategies for focusing on team member well-being, sharing any lessons learned, both pre-COVID, which I know seems like a really long time ago, but also during COVID-19. I think all of us recognize that in a crisis time, our leadership looks a little different, and there are still foundational principles that carry us through those crises. So lessons learned, and I'm really hoping that in these 90 minutes, it's a place where some of you, if you can inhale and kind of take a deep breath, that it's also an ability for you to reflect a little bit on your own practice and hopefully take away some inspiration and acknowledgement of the hard work that you do. So just a reminder of context, for those of you that were in the December webinar, welcome back. For those of you that weren't, welcome for the first time. In December, what we talked about and emphasized was the importance of the team leader to ACT implementation, and really highlighted that there really is very little written about this key role. And so we're kind of making it up as we go in some ways. We know that the team leader's role is extremely diverse, and in looking at what team leaders do to have high performing teams, one thing that we found was there's this real deliberate focus by the leader on thinking about team members' well-being. And I can only imagine how that's even more personified in COVID-19, where it's maybe more on the physical safety versus psychological safety, although those are both there, but really having it in the forefront of your mind, the importance of the safety and health and well-being of your staff. So I hope also, what Mimi and I hope is that through this platform of being able to share some of the strategies that you've employed or that you've worked on implementing, that by the end of this, we will be able to compile a list of a very robust list of different strategies that you as team leaders, or those of you that know team leaders and observe, really can create a list that you could actually take and use. So we're hoping for that level of discussion today. So the learning objectives are to describe the ways that ACT team leaders assess their team members' well-being. Second, understand those strategies that are used to respond and to support team members' well-being. And I'll talk really briefly about a theoretical framework. And then hoping that you can leave with at least one action step that you can take in your team, maybe this afternoon, this week, that really will help support your team members' well-being. So when Mimi and I were preparing for this, we realized that well-being might be one of those catchwords that we all think we know what we're talking about, but that there might be slight variations in regards to how we're defining. So we put this in here that we're using well-being in a bit of a more generalized way, and it's the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. And so that hopefully will frame it a little bit. There's a lot of different ways to be well, and we're talking mostly here about both the physical well-being, but also the psychological well-being of your team members. And I think a lot of team leaders will say things like, I'm looking at the energy of my team, or the morale. And so those are also concepts that when we talk about well-being in an ACT team that we're including. So this is just prep for you to get your phones ready. We're gonna try a poll everywhere, poll to see, and if this bombs, then it bombs. But if you can text, it's my whole name minus the R on the end of my name. So Lynette Studer 579. If you can text that to 37607. I'm going to ask a question in the next slide, and hopefully that will work. I'll give people just another few seconds. All right, so the question to answer is, as an ACT team leader, how would you answer the following question? I think about the physical and psychological well-being of my individual team members, and then you can pick one of the 5 answers. I see also, if it's easier to click the link in the chat, you can do that. But I'll give a fair amount of time to just answer this and see where we get. It's always interesting at this point to see the competing bars. All right, I'll give another 10 or 15 seconds. All right. So we'll call it for now. We'll try to fix a few technical problems. There's another poll that'll be coming up. But I think that this is pretty representative, right? Like 3 to 5, 3 days or more is really the majority, 97% of the responses. So this is a real thing. And these are sometimes the situations that we take home at night with us that prevent us from falling asleep quick, or, really trying to figure out how to problem solve the well-being of our team members. And I, for one, can say I've never was trained or taught to kind of think about how this component of my leadership was really important. But, as you all know, it really, really is. 70% of you at least daily are thinking about your team and the well-being. So thank you, everyone. We'll keep problem solving that also. All right. So these are a couple quotes from team leaders, and I think that they really sum up this issue that we're faced with. And I think with every passing year, I recognize of equal importance to caring for the clients that we serve as me caring for my team. And if I don't care and nurture them, they're kind of right up there for me with the caring and the nurturing that I provide my clients. That if I don't nurture and care and give feedback, then they're going to go. I think they'll go. I don't think they'll stay, because I don't think just knowing that you're doing a good job is always enough. And then another team leader, I think that the things that are most important to me is really honestly that the team is healthy, just from the standpoint of it is the resource that we have. And these sentiments align with what we know in the literature too, which is some of the largest challenges in implementing evidence-based practices is turnover of staff. And I don't need to tell you how turnover can really kind of take a lot of time, but also the disruption that has in a client's recovery process also. So dust off your old memory. One of the things that we talked about in December was a study that I conducted that really focused in and looked on what the team leader does and how they do it. And within that study, 7 out of the 12 themes on how the team leader was practicing their leadership had some immediate connection to team members and well-being. So it really is a significant part. At minimum 50% of this person's time, the activities of what they were doing focus specifically on team member well-being, or creating an environment that impacted team member well-being. So today, one of what we hope to do is to go through some of these themes and actually provide a framework for you as team leaders to kind of step back and say, oh, this is a way that I can provide support that maybe you haven't thought of, and to enhance your practice and hopefully to enhance the impact that you have on your team members. So within that, these were the 7 out of the 12 themes that were directly linked to how these team leaders in this study created or tried to influence the well-being. So they functioned as a role model and as a teacher. They set high and clear expectations. They had a direct, open, transparent, and understandable communication style. They were really mindful of individual team members. They promoted strengths and professional growth. they served as the team's protector, and they established a fun and positive work environment. So how did they do that, or what are some of the ways that they did that? So as I was gathering this information, I became really curious, and I wondered if there was a current framework, because in mental health, we're kind of behind in understanding leadership, but other fields, business, nursing, military, they've all got a really robust set of studies that talk about leadership. So I was wondering if there was another framework of leadership that helped describe some of these particular findings. And so here's your next poll, wherever, is how many of you have heard about this Bass's theory of transformational leadership? It's probably not something you got in social work class. You might have picked it up somewhere else. And if the polls aren't working, please feel free to put in the Q&A or chats. So I'm gonna call it. So, right, I hadn't heard much of it either. And here we have, pretty much we're falling into the no's and the maybes. What I found was that there was this theory of leadership created by a person named Bass in 1985. It was called the multi-factor model of leadership. I don't want this to become a super theoretical webinar, and so I'm not gonna kind of give more background to it, but I do want to walk through it because I do feel like it's probably, there are components that you've probably integrated into your practice that you may not even be aware of. So I feel there's power in knowledge, and that's part of the purpose of sharing this. So there are two sides to this theory. One's transactional leadership and the other is transformational. I'm just going to focus on the transformational leadership part because I felt like that was a better fit. So there are these four components. Sometimes they're referred to as the 4 I's, but they're idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. And I'm going to go through each one and give some examples. Before I do that, I do want to say that there is a really extensive body of literature that looks at transformational leadership and this multi-factor model of leadership. And one thing that is clear is that for individuals that have transformational leadership, that's typically characterized by the ability to bring about a change or a transformation in the followers or in team members in order to meet the needs of the organization. And if you think about your role as bringing assertive community treatment into fruition in some ways to better the needs of your organization or your agency or your state, I feel like that's exactly what we're called to do. Most of us haven't heard of assertive community treatment before we're working in it or we're leading a team. And it really is asking you to do something in a different way, especially since it's an evidence-based practice. So I felt like the idea behind transformational leadership really aligned well with assertive community treatment leaders. The other important note of the literature is that research has convincingly demonstrated that highly effective leaders use transformational approaches more often and more frequently. And to me, that really spoke with the team leaders that I had the privilege of knowing and watching them work. There was really something about how they approached the work that I felt was important in the outcomes that they were getting with clients. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more to that. And I'll be interested while I'm talking about this, I'll be interested in your opinions of, do you see parts of your leadership reflected in this particular framework? So draw your own examples. So I'm sorry, I'm just moving my, my visual box. So these are the definitions of these particular components of the model. And just one thing, in regards to idealized influence, those are broken into 2 subcategories. So one is attributes or traits or characteristics of the leader themselves. And then influence, idealized influence behavior is the activity that the leader does. So there are those kind of 2 subsets of idealized influence. All right. I'm going to move on to each one individually. So know that if you didn't get a chance to digest all of that slide, there'll be more opportunity. So the first is idealized influence. Leaders served as role models and embodied the values the leaders wanted team members to be learning. They set a commitment to having a high quality ACT team. And attributes included trustworthiness, respectfulness, determination, and confidence. And they used those traits to really try to inspire and motivate others. And they walked the talk. And I can't tell you how important this is for team members to see leaders that are, down in the trenches with them and doing the hard work, not just delegating the work out. And so they really promoted the vision. They led by example and had really strong commitments to the goal. And they held a lot of power and influence with team members because they were so trusted and had high levels of, team members invested high levels of confidence in their ability. It's the time where in your own work, you may have followed a leader blindly because you really trusted that that leader would have your back, even though you weren't necessarily sure of what that outcome might look like. So as a point of reflection, I just, because you probably don't have even time to go to the bathroom in your day, taking 30 seconds to kind of sit and give yourself some space to say, how do you see idealized influence in your own leadership? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about that. So here are some examples of what some team leaders have done or how team members have viewed their team leaders. So one team leader said, one of the things I have responsibility for doing is really playing similar roles. So if I want my staff to be coaching and teaching and really doing rehab work, I've got to apply those same principles every day and in supervision around coaching, teaching, helping elicit their desire for growth, their inner strengths, bring those out so that they can in turn do the same things with people they're working with. Right. So I think that really plays into the modeling, the good role modeling that this particular leader was modeling in her interactions with other team members, what she was hoping that then that person could go out and do with clients. And then this is from a team member that was interviewed. So I still think it's at least important for me to note that she takes the same number of on-call shifts as every other team member. She's in the weekend rotation, just like everybody else. She works just as many holidays. So I mean, she really, and then the second team member said, yeah. Third team member said, once again, she leads by example. Now, I think that this is important, but I also think this is a really great time to insert that we all have our own individual styles of leadership. And most of you are trained as social workers, so you're very used to looking at the person and environment. And for some team leaders, this is something that they can do because the environment might support it. Other team leaders might not be able to, and I don't want people to think that if they're not able to take the same number of on-call shifts, that makes them a bad leader. These are just examples in regards to how, with this particular team members saw this person as leading by example. And then this is a really great quote too on how that team leader set the vision. So I have the responsibility to hold the vision for my team, that as an ACT team leader, I have to have a clear picture. What I do is I hold the picture of where we're going, where we want to be, and I have the responsibility to hold that vision and have some idea of how we might get there. You know, the paths can change, but I need to have some ideas. And that's been my responsibility since day one, to hold that vision. So that's what I do as an ACT team leader. And I think this is so important that when we're talking about the well-being of your team members, really by holding the vision of where you want to be, and this can be pre-COVID and this can be during COVID, can really provide a sense of confidence and psychological safety for your team, right? That somebody is driving the car and that you know where you're going, and even if you don't know where you're going, that they trust that you're holding that vision, you're holding the map for them. And so I don't think we often contribute like vision setting as a way to help our staff in being mindful of their well-being, but I do think that that is that can be considered, thinking about well-being and making sure that people are feeling confident in what your team is doing and where they're going, because the ultimate vision is that clients get better, right? And most team members are on the team in order to be able to accomplish that. And so holding that space for people can be really important. So the second is inspirational motivation, and the title kind of says it all. And I think most of us are really inspired by charismatic individuals. There are certain people that you want to be around because they motivate you to feel better, to do better. And this is no different in regards to this theoretical framework. So here, the team leader exhibits optimism and excitement about goals and future states. And one of the best examples I have when I've done training with team leaders is to say, like, if you have a client that's going to be admitted, and I worked in a rural community, and so sadly a lot of clients would come with a lot of preconceived notions or kind of a reputation. And if I went into my staff and I was like, oh my gosh, just wait, this is going to be something. I set a tone, and that's not very optimistic. But if I come in and say, finally, we have the opportunity to change this person's life because we are this team of just unstoppable folks, and how exciting this is going to be. Which team would you rather sit on? Right. And so I think and it has to be realistic, right? Your team members aren't going to, they're going to be able to see through something that isn't quite as authentic, but really exhibiting that kind of excitement can make a big difference. So I'm wondering if in the Q&A box, and maybe my tech people will jump on if I have this wrong, but it would be great for you to think about ways that you provide inspiration or motivation to your team. And if you can put those in the Q&A box so people can see it, that would be wonderful. And I didn't know if we'll crash the system if everybody does it at once. So I thought in the first minute, if your name, the first letter of your last name is A through L, go ahead and put your strategy in the box. And then in the second minute, we'll do the M's through Z's. But this is a way where I think that we could really generate a lot of strategies. There's 148 participants, so even if only half of you put something up, that's still 70 strategies that we might get. So ways that you inspire or motivate your team. Food. We're going to talk about that. Food, good. Pictures. In the chat, I have recognize accomplishments at staffing. Team building activities, laughter, fun. That's great. Swag, I like the swag.
It sounds like a bunch of folks are putting it in the chat box, but if you could put it in the Q&A, that will allow everyone else to see versus just Lynette and the panelists. I think it was helpful that you read those out loud, Lynette, so they could hear what people were putting in the chat itself, but not everyone will be able to see those.
Thanks, Maria. So put them in the Q&A. I'll read a few in the chat as those are going up. We have coffee for the team at team meetings, stressing self-care, recognizing accomplishments, focus on their attributes, their immediate state of behavior, lead by example. Good. So now if you haven't already and your last name starts between M and Z, and feel free to put in the Q&A so everyone can see it. Motivational quotes, that's neat. Cook food for your meetings. That's great. Little gifts. Text at the end of the days on Friday saying good job, that's great. Positive affirmations on their desk. All right, this will be great. Mimi and I will compile these answers and then get them out to you all just so that you can see what other people are doing. Some are, I always thought too that some are wonderful if you can like do gift cards, but sometimes whether it's via policy or because you have a team of 20 and you don't have money for gift cards, I really appreciate the non-costly ways as well, because that can break a bank. Taking time to pause and recognize how hard we're working from Rebecca. Those are great. Thank you, everyone. Those are really wonderful. So we will continue to feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll create a list that maybe there's one on there that you haven't thought of that you can use at your next meeting. So, all right. I knew that you'd have answers, which is awesome. So with the team leaders that I had spoken with, these were their ways for supporting the well-being and specifically trying to create a motivating or an inspirational environment. So I keep it up morale by acknowledging it's hard work. I keep it up by saying what they do is impressive and they do something that not everyone can do. I keep it up by allowing laughter and allowing some silliness because that doesn't hurt anything. I keep it up by letting them know I appreciate them, and whether that's telling them directly or by listening to them tell me about their kids, whether it's approving in a potluck. That's why we celebrating anniversaries, baking a cake myself, bringing it in. I keep morale up by encouraging them to attend a training or a conference because I think those are not just educational, they're also morale boosting. And then the other team leaders. So I think motivation is important. I think effectiveness is probably also influenced by I think my staff see me as being aligned with their values. I think they see me as really having the client's best interest in mind. And that's what's usually most important to them, is the outcome for somebody. And my guess is that that's similar for many of you and your teams too, that when you're getting frustrated, it's because somehow you feel like you're not being able to help the client reach an outcome. And then these were just a few others. The other thing I think from an unconscious perspective is that I just kind of, my outlook on life, overall, I don't really see things from a dramatic perspective. I am hopeful and optimistic that things will be just fine, and I really trust that. So even if a staff makes a mistake, or if it's news for the team, I think I typically present it in a way that it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Our clients are going to be okay. It'll be fine. Let me move. And then this was in response to, what if they get bad news, and how are they going to discuss that with the team? If they find out something that the team, that's going to kind of overtax the team. And so this team leader said that a tough situation is something we can deal with and we can get through, and I might say I don't like it or I disagree with it, but still want to present it as, let's just do it. So not getting stopped by obstacles themselves. And then I thought that this was a really great quote that we've gotten from one of our listening sessions that I felt really was also indicative of this inspirational motivation that many of you have going on right now because of COVID. And this is where we got the inspiration for the title of this, but we aren't going to fail, right? And I think this is so indicative of the amazing work so many of you have done in COVID-19, of forging ahead without a clear roadmap, but knowing that the safety of your clients, the safety and well-being of your team have set the course for what work that you're going to do. And you show up. You show up in different ways that are still really effective. So my hat's off to you on that. So that was inspirational motivation. So that was the second out of the 4 components that we're looking at with this framework. So the third is intellectual stimulation, how you help your team members and yourself continue to be curious and really stimulated by the work that you do. So the definition of this in Bass's model is that you're examining new perspectives for solving problems and completing tasks. And I can't think of any other work, outside of ACT that keeps you guessing every day. Every day can be new. Every day is not the same. Challenging your followers to be creative and innovative, really challenging the status quo, and encouraging your team members to explore new ways of doing things and new opportunities to learn. And I think that you're particularly well poised for that, because a lot of times a situation will come up and you will try to remediate a barrier for a client and it doesn't work. So you come back and at your team meeting, you think, okay, what's the next way that we can try that? So in some ways, I feel like the model allows you to have some of this intellectual stimulation built in. But now another moment of just self-reflection and thinking about, how does intellectual stimulation show up in your work? In what ways do you try to promote that with your team? And really try to make sure that they're constantly growing? How do you promote creativity within the evidence-based practice of ACT, right? A lot of times you can't just get super creative in some respects because it's an evidence-based practice. So thinking about how you might do that differently. And again, I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to just kind of think about that for yourself. And please feel free to share your ideas in the Q&A. I know it says chat on the slides, but again, I think we can all benefit if there's different ways for that. Again, my guess is that a lot of you do this in different ways for your team. So again, this is how some of the team leads, some team leads have thought about it. An agency supervisor had said of a team leader, she's always very interested in looking at growing her people, as I kind of term it, and helping them strengthen their abilities in working with the consumers. I think we're so good at identifying, or I hope we're good at identifying the strengths of our clients and how to utilize the strengths of the clients to help them achieve the goals that they have for themselves. And I think that we can use that same process with our staff and with our team members, right? And really looking at what some of their strengths are and being able to try to support that to help them professionally grow. The second example, I think, is a really wonderful one. She kind of picks up on subtleties. She'll say things like, it looks as though maybe you're asking a lot of questions about the admission sides of ACT. Do you want to go with me someday and do an assessment? So kind of asking, what are your professional goals and how can I help you meet those? Even if it's not here in this moment. But what information can I give you that will make your life as a professional better? That definitely is the key to my job satisfaction here, right? So constantly thinking about how are you going to keep people, right? And how are you able to really help them grow as a professional when there's a lot of day-to-day things that need to be covered. All right. This, I think, was a quote that is wonderful, and I think it does a really nice job of talking about how you follow an evidence-based practice, but you can still have creativity within it. So this team leader indicated the more that you can create structure, I kind of see ACT as being structure, 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 and then complete flexibility. I see it as part of my job to really help the group step back and think about the larger picture. Think about what do we want to do next in terms of change or growth, and then what do you need to do that? And I really do feel like with ACT, and I've used the analogy of building a house, like you want structure for your house, for your foundation. You want your walls to be solid. You want your roof not to cave in. So you follow guidelines for what that looks like. And then the flexibility becomes what you decorate the rooms and how you make it be your house. And I think ACT is similar, where within the evidence-based practice, you have a set of kind of guidelines that you need to follow, right, in order for you to actually have an ACT team. But then you're able, as the leader and your team, have this wonderful flexibility of how you get the work done within that structure. So I appreciated that quote a lot. And then the final is individualized consideration. And that is really what it sounds like. It's focusing on the development and mentoring of followers and really attending to the individual needs of your team and of individual team members. Helping figure out how you can create specific learning opportunities, really valuing individual differences and the diversity of your team, seeing strengths, and really encouraging two-way communication. So leaders that have individualized consideration are very people-driven. They tend to be good listeners, and they really have this genuine concern for team members. And so here's a couple quotes with this. Where a team member really said, I think she cares about us as individual people, like outside of work. She'll say, how was your weekend? How are your kids doing? How are you feeling today? I think via our ACT team meeting, whether that's by Zoom, whether it's in person, those are the times when these practices really have a natural, organic way of coming up and doing that check-in, right? and just making sure that your team members feel like they're valued as individuals. Another team leader said, but then there's also a challenge that's different for each team member, working on identifying what that is for each team member. How do I know which team members the personal notes mean everything to them because they have them plastered on their office walls? You know, I don't think that holds meaning for a certain team member. But for a different one, every personal note I've ever written for them is on their bulletin board. So, okay, mental note to self, that means something for them. But figuring that out for each team member is a really fun challenge, that what works for one person isn't going to work for the next. So for those that are motivated by food, that's awesome. You bring in the food. For those that are motivated by you going out of your way for 3 minutes to just touch base with them and let them know that they did a really good job with a certain client, that can be another way, and it's certainly not a one size fits all. I think the challenge for us as team leaders is that there's a lot of time that goes into this, right? That you're busy doing med deliveries or rehab appointments for folks. You know, you're managing the program, you're making sure that your budget's good, you're doing all of those things, and this takes time. But I would challenge you that so does hiring a new person and onboarding a new person. And I feel like, all things considered, it takes less time to invest in your current staff. But I realize that that's not, I'm assuming a lot of you want to do that. And I'm assuming that there are times when there's not enough hours in the day. So just being aware of this, I think, can be helpful. I've been surprised with how many team leaders that I've talked to, that just being able to deliberately thank your team for the job that they're doing really means so much to the team members. And so I think that that's something that many of you do, that I want to underscore is an important part of well-being. This quote I thought was helpful too, because with this team leader, they were really looking at mental health days, day off, really checking in clinical supervision about a person's job satisfaction. And I know from my own practice that sometimes I did that, and sometimes I didn't want to know the answer because it can be frustrating to not have the solutions to fix that. But really being mindful of that and really doing your best to balance the needs of individuals with the needs of all your other team members. That can be a real struggle too. Not everybody can have the same day off, right? And so really trying to balance that. So we're done with kind of that framework, the 4 I's, right? And I really feel that from an ACT team leader perspective, at least in the practices that I've seen, that these 4 transformational components really do provide some strategies for us in regards to how we can influence team member well-being. And so one of the things that I hope that you take away from that is that you can pull different ideas from each one of these 4 areas. And hopefully that will impact your team members and how they're feeling. But there was more to consider, right? This is only 4 components of what you do. And if I said this is the theory that matches the best, I think many of you would say, yeah, but there is so much more to still consider. So looking back at the 7 themes that were found in my study, I still want to highlight 2 more that I feel the theory didn't really do a good job with. And that was about the team leader serving as the team's protector and establishing this fun and positive work environment. So Bass talks about inspiration and motivation, which is great, but doesn't really talk about fun in positive work environment. So you've heard me say this before, that team leaders really can serve as the team's protector, and that really makes a big difference to well-being. So a lot of times your politically savvy advocates And you're able to shield team members from outside challenges, wherever that might come from. Many team leaders have good judgment in sensitive situations, and have fostered many program allies to help with team protection, right? So you've used your skills, your relationship building skills, to also buffer the team members from outside influences that could negatively impact their work. So again, these were just a couple of quotes. In the study that I did, both all the team leaders talked and literally used the phrase mama bear in regards to kind of how it was described that they do this protective buffering role, which I think is really important, that there's this protective factor with team members. And you allow, by doing that, team leaders allow the staff to just go out and do the work, right? So I think that that's important. And then just this positive, fun work environment. And based on what you put in the Q&A, it looks like you're all, a lot of you are already thinking about this in regards to how you shape the preferable work environment, and really how you're trying to, even in pandemic times, you're really working and trying to create team cohesion and improved morale. And in the study I did, the team environments were described as fun and relaxed and calm, and team members took a lot of ownership into that, but identified their leader as being a really crucial part of that. And so I find this interesting because ACT work is not typically relaxed and calm. There's a pace to it. But I don't necessarily think everyone would say we're super relaxed and calm here. But these environments had, during team meetings, there was this really kind of an enjoyable space where people could come and exhale and see colleagues and really felt like they were grounded in the work that they were doing. So these were a couple of quotes. She's very fun, meaning the team leader. She's very fun. And I've heard more than a few clients comment on, well, look, there's so-and-so smiling again. Like even the twice a year contact they have with her at treatment planning, they know that she's going to be there smiling and laughing, and that it's going to be an uplifting experience to be around her. And then an agency supervisor commented, she does humor and celebrations, very good about that. They take time at that team meeting to make sure people are recognized for their hard work, whether it's success for a client, success for themselves, or sometimes a birthday. It can be really hard for us to compartmentalize some of our emotions too, and we get a lot of support from the team. But I think in regards to that quote, the quotation that's in the orange, it's really important for us to realize that our mood sets the tone for everyone else, and so to the effect that we can have a really positive outlook is wonderful. I always encourage other team leaders to find mentors in other team leaders that you can kind of have those like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do conversations with, and try not to always make the team be your sounding board in some ways, if it happens a lot. And then if you take nothing else from this, figuring out how you can incorporate food and potlucks and sticky notes. And I joke, I know potlucks are not anything that's on our docket in the next couple of months for sure, given all the COVID, but this was, and I said this in the first webinar, this was really something. So I'm going to give you a minute to read this really large quotation. So to these two things, I haven't dug deeper into why food and potlucks are so important to the cohesiveness of the team. I'm guessing there's not a whole lot of stuff out there on that, but the idea of breaking bread, having a break, especially in the fast-paced world of assertive community treatment, where I should probably take a poll to ask how many of you eat in your cars in non-COVID times, because the schedule can be really brutal, right? And so this idea of having a set aside space to just be able as a team to be with one another and to as this person said, exhale as a group, I think is really important, and is something that most teams and most team leaders can organize, and seems to be really, really important. And so something to consider, maybe when you're back having a celebration potluck, that COVID is in the rear view mirror for us. And then the sticky notes, and this was something that I did within my own team that really had an exponential benefit of, I would say on a Monday, this is the week where I want you to write at least one sticky note, catching a staff doing something good. And it was amazing to watch people come at that time into the office and see a bright colored sticky note on their mailbox, and just, you could almost, as a team lead, you could watch the mood and the excitement change. Like they wanted to get to their mailbox to see what that sticky note was. And it also created, it kind of decrease the clicks in the team, if that makes any sense, because you would have staff catching staff that they don't work with as much, or maybe they're not as close with, doing something great, and it really would increase the morale in the room with that. So that was really a great idea. And I'll be curious, and it's coming up in the next slide, of what you've learned to do in COVID. How have your strategies for fun and building a cohesive culture shifted during COVID-19? So again, this is a spot where I hope you can throw in the Q&A just some ideas that you've had, since a lot of you aren't still in the same physical space with one another. How have you been able to focus still on fun environments? So, oh, that's a great idea. I DoorDash cupcakes for staff birthdays. That's a great idea. Other ideas people have? Oh, that's great. Picking out a 1,000-piece puzzle to work on together. Jackpot games, haven't even heard of that. Now I'm gonna have to do some searching. I've placed items on staff desk, thanking them for their work, is one in the chat. A rule of no shop talk, which is great. Doing distant lunches when weather's nice. Elisa, I don't know where you're at right now. It's 1 degree out at my place, but that sounds really wonderful. Online and Zoom party, use phone to log in. In the chat, someone has a bulletin board with birthdays and writing special messages on that. A Zoom get to know each other activity, like making a PowerPoint of old photos of ourselves. Oh, that sounds fun and dangerous. That's great. All right, Zoom scavenger hunt for gift cards. So you all are ahead of the game in thinking about how you continue to build a cohesive team, to continue to do the work. despite being in the physical proximity. So there's so much to learn from you all as team leads in regards to how you've had to pivot and do your work in a much, much different way. Ice skating excursion, too cold. Bingo offered every Friday. That's great, right? Even little things I would imagine, like, you know, dogs and cats to the Zoom meeting. The team meetings are probably pretty fun if you have animals at home. So somebody used to end their meeting with dad jokes, but they had to be a PG rating. That I feel is good. Awesome. So those are really, really great ideas. Continue to feel like you can go ahead and put them in the Q&A just so that everybody else can see the wonderful work that you're doing. All right, so kind of nearing the end here in regards to this. So in summary, ACT team leaders, you spend a significant amount of hours thinking and trying to figure out how to impact team member well-being. And I think that both happens collectively in your team meetings and your treatment planning meetings, and also individually with each person. Transformational leadership may hold a partial framework for explaining some of your behavior. For those of you that are interested in learning more, there's so much. If you just Google transformational leadership, you can find many different ways to go down the rabbit hole of the internet in regards to that. But I do think, based on my own experience and some of my research, that does hold some interesting parallels to our work as ACT team leaders. There's been a lot of ways of assessing well-being, and I appreciate everyone for sharing your ideas within this format of really kind of thinking about the strategies of ways to support ACT team members. I'm hoping that with some of those, by applying a framework, a theoretical framework, that maybe that also gives you some future ability to kind of look a little bit more and apply that to your own leadership and get even more strategies. If you feel like maybe you're really strong in one of those areas and you know a little bit less in others, doing a little bit more studying to try to figure out, how can I really do better at intellectual stimulation with my staff, right? How do I use my clinical supervision to try to really focus a little bit more on that? I know I'm assuming all of you are super busy, and the last thing that you're thinking about, you're probably not putting your own needs in front of the needs of your team members, and I really honor and respect that. But when you have a moment to yourself, I think to really create your own strategy in each of the following areas, you know, even just one thing, if you think about, okay, how am I gonna establish even more of a fun and positive work environment? Hey, somebody does Friday bingo, let's do that. Or, you know, setting clear and high expectations. That can be really important in this time of COVID. Like, high expectations is probably, we're not going to grow as a program. We are trying to survive, and we are trying to just get through. And my expectations is that you take care of yourself, and we just get to where we can look back on this in August, right? Or however. But I think for your own professional growth and your own intellectual stimulation, I think it can be helpful for you to create your own plan and your own roadmap about what you're hoping, how your practice as a leader can shift in regards to the information that we shared today. So, and then this is Mimi and my plea that we really are trying to take some of these ideas and study them even further. And so we continue to really want and need your help to find out what's missing in this description of who team leaders are and what they're doing. And so we're in kind of near the end of pulling together a survey that we will be hopefully disseminating, that really attaches to some of this information and other information that we think might really do a good job of holistically describing what it is that that you do, because your work is so incredibly crucial for the clients and the families that you serve, that we really feel like we need to better understand this so that in the future we can that the work that you've done to figure out how to do this can be of benefit to new workers, new team leaders that are coming up, and that we can hopefully have a better roadmap than what many of you have had in regards to your leadership. So, and with that, I wanted to give about 20 minutes for Q&A. And so I want to thank you on behalf of myself and with Mimi and for joining us today. There are email addresses. Please feel free to email us if you have any other questions or comments.